you got to do a little bigger digging. Okay. And as somebody that when I first started in the stock market, 2008, 2009, I started as strictly a value investor, meaning essentially if it was over a 20 PE, don't talk to me. I don't want to even see it. I don't want to talk about it. All I want to say is that's overvalued. No, it's a ripoff. Okay. As I got more and more into the stock market over time, you start to learn more about growth stocks. You start to learn more about valuing growth stocks, how to project out numbers for companies, right? And I started down this rabbit hole really started in like 2011, 2012, after I'd been in the market several years, because I realized, oh my gosh, I'm missing so many opportunities in front of me, but because it's over a PE of over 20, I can't accept it. You got to do a little more digging. It looks like these stocks are overvalued, right? I mean, the forward P of NVIDIA is over 3x the market. The forward P of Palantir is over 2x the market, right? Do a little more digging here. Now, what NVIDIA just reported changed everything forever. Not just in terms of NVIDIA, but for every stock that is involved in the AI movement. Because what just happened is NVIDIA just said AI is for real, but not by just saying it. They did it by their guidance and their numbers. And we got huge stuff happening here, okay? Analysts were expecting for this past quarter $6.5 billion of revenue, and NVIDIA did 7.2. But here's where things changed forever. And this just changed everything in the market, the way you have to value many of these companies and everything, okay? Here's what happened. Analysts were expecting NVIDIA to do $7 billion, a little over $7 billion of revenue next quarter, which was going to be 6% growth, okay? NVIDIA just announced that they're expecting $11 billion, which is 60% growth year over year. When I say this is the most shocking earnings I've ever seen from a company in terms of their outlooking guidance, especially for a big company, I mean it. I've never seen a company analyst be at 6% growth and the company say we're going to do 60% growth. That just, anybody that had any doubts about is AI for real, is this not for real, just got thrown right out the window. Shocking guidance. I mean, we're talking about a 10x of what analysts were expecting versus what the company's going to come in at. Now, the next place your brain should go is, oh my gosh, the next quarter is going to be so massive that like the future quarters are going to be pretty huge as well. So which means this changes yearly numbers. This changes the fiscal year we're in, the next year as well, right? Which NVIDIA is already in their fiscal year 2024. I understand we're in calendar year 2023 right now, but some companies are already into their fiscal year 2024. NVIDIA is one of those companies. And in terms of this, right, NVIDIA, $30 billion was the expectation from analysts as far as revenue for this year. The company's gonna, I mean, it's not even in the conversation anymore. The biggest question is, does NVIDIA do $35 billion in fiscal year 2024, $40 billion, $45 billion, or $50 billion? That's the biggest question. What number do they put up this year? 35, 40, 45, 50. That's the biggest question now at this point in time. This also massively changes next year's numbers. 37 was the expectation for next year. That's laughable now. I mean, now you got to be talking about 50, 60, 70 for next year, based upon these sorts of growth rates. Because when it comes to a cycle of selling these sorts of chips, it's not usually just like we sell them for 1 year and then that's it. It's usually a multi-year cycle, okay? You know, what's crazy about this stock price move is this is a stock you could pick up for less than $110 9 months ago. 9 flippin' flapjacking months ago, you get the stock for less than $110. And I can tell you by the end of the prep of this video, the stock was pushing close to $400 a share. That is incredible, okay? Now, when you look at the numbers here, we have a lot of differing information, okay? First off, as far as the headline numbers, it looks great, right? Earnings per share beat very nicely as far as what analysts were expecting versus what the company was expecting. Revenue came at $7.2 billion versus $6.5 billion was expected. That's a very nice beat there, okay? Now, when you look at these numbers, this is not impressive, okay? This is not the impressive part. The next part I'm going to get to is why you have to throw out every forward P calculation, forward price to sales ratio, everything based upon what I'm about to show you in just a minute. But in terms of these numbers, this isn't good, okay? Revenue was actually down almost over $1 billion on a year-over-year basis. Cost of revenue didn't even go down close to $1 billion, which if that's the situation, your gross profit's going to erode in a massive way. And that's exactly what happened for NVIDIA here, right? Research and development, sales and general administrative, they grew those a little bit. That's not too much, right? No, there's a trick here. Okay, so last year they had an acquisition termination cost of $1.3 billion last year. Well, guess what? They didn't have that cost this year. So it looks like income from operations was up nicely year over year, right? 2.1 billion income from operations this year versus 1.8 billion the same quarter last year. But in reality, their income from operations last year, if it wasn't for this termination cost, would have been $3.2 billion, somewhere in there roughly, right? And so ultimately, their income from operations, if you take out this termination cost, would have actually been down over $1 billion on a year-over-year basis, okay? And you look at their net income, and it looks like they grew net income year over year, right? $2 billion in net income versus $1.6 billion in net income in the same quarter last year. But really, their net income should be down on a year-over-year basis if you didn't have this one-time termination cost in there. So that's something to keep in mind. But what I just showed you there is actually completely irrelevant, folks. This changes everything for NVIDIA forever. Look at this. The company just said they're going to do revenue of $11 billion for this coming quarter. Now you might say, okay, it's a big deal, $11 billion. If you don't have anything to reference off of, that doesn't seem that insane. This is probably the most insane beat in terms of a guide beat I've ever seen in my 15 years of being in the stock market for a big company. I've never seen something this insane in my life. Okay, analysts were expecting the company to do $7 billion next quarter. I don't even know where to start with how big of a beat that is on terms of revenue. I mean, we're talking about a $4 billion beat. Even on the high side, analysts were expecting like $9 billion on the high side, right? Or actually, the high estimate was $8.69 billion. So they just blew, even the most bullish analysts on Wall Street, they blew their numbers out of the water. And it's not even remotely close, okay? This changes everything forever in regards to NVIDIA. This also proves AI is for real. This isn't just some buzzword. This is about to take off like a rocket ship. But in terms of NVIDIA, people are still using these, looking at PE metrics, forward PE metrics, trying to judge the stock and saying it's overvalued. You can't even value this company right now. When a company comes in and says they're going to do $11 billion for the next quarter, when analysts were all $7 billion, that fundamentally changes everything. That changes fundamentally the numbers for this year, the numbers for next year. It changes what EPS is going to be, net income is going to be. All these EPS projections the analysts had out there are so low from what the company's actually going to report now at this point in time. The analysts are going to have to go on the biggest binge we've probably ever seen for a big company ever in terms of bringing up their EPS estimates, in terms of bringing up their revenue estimates. And so therefore, the company, believe it or not, could actually, going into these earnings, was actually probably really undervalued. And that's insane to think about for a stock that went from less than $110 to $300 in a matter of 9 months. But the fact is, when you have a fundamental change like that, everything's changed forever. If you were saying NVIDIA is overvalued, you simply are not looking from the right frame of thought, because you got to understand all the numbers you think you're looking at that you think are real numbers are not real numbers.